A girl is reading a passage from a book about a battle between a demon lord and a mage. In the passage, the demon lord is frustrated that the mage keeps fighting, no matter what. The mage explains that he keeps going because he has people to protect, and that thought gives him strength. He then strikes the demon lord with lightning, which ultimately defeats him and brings their long, hard-fought battle to an end. After finishing the book, the girl lets out a satisfied sigh. The next scene shows Rumia walking through Alazo town. She's a student at Alazo Magic Academy. She notices a man has just injured himself and rushes to help him. After using magic to heal his injury, the man sees her school badge and praises her for her impressive use of magic. However, she asks him to keep it a secret since it's forbidden to use magic outside the academy. While she's talking to him, her friend Sistine comes looking for her, and together they head to school. As they walk into school, they're surprised to see a guy running toward them at full speed. Without thinking, Sistine casts a spell that throws him into the air and into a nearby fountain. Once they see him land in the water, they start to worry they've taken it too far. But to their relief, he surfaces unharmed. They quickly apologize, but he arrogantly claims they're solely responsible for what happened, ignoring that he charged at them first. He then makes an inappropriate move toward Rumia, as if checking for reasons to accept their apology. This infuriates Sistine, who throws him back into the fountain. Meanwhile, Hallie-kun is in the headmaster's office, anxiously waiting for the guy in the fountain, Glenn Radars. He's a new teacher at the academy who was supposed to report earlier, but no one could reach him. Hallie regrets that, even though Glenn is a temporary replacement for the former teacher, Huey, they shouldn't have hired him. While the students are wondering why their new teacher is late, he suddenly shows up. Sistine and Rumia are shocked to discover that he's actually the same guy they encountered earlier that day. Back in the headmaster's office, Hallie-kun continues to discuss Glenn's qualifications. They notice from his credentials that he's just an average, third-grade mage, but they also remember he was recommended by a respected professor, Arphonia. Hallie-kun starts to badmouth Glenn when Cecilia-kun walks in and demands he take back what he said. The headmaster asks why she defends Glenn so much, and she replies that it's a long, unhappy story, and she just hopes he lives a full life. Meanwhile, the students in Glenn's class are unhappy with his teaching. Sistine confronts him about his incompetence, but while she is speaking, the school bell rings, signaling the start of a new class. This gives Glenn a chance to rush out while she's talking. The students head to a changing room to get ready for the next class. As they're changing clothes, they all jump when Glenn walks into the room full of naked girls, and instead of looking away, he boldly claims he's done nothing wrong and that he will enjoy the view of their naked bodies. The girls are annoyed by this, and yet again, Glenn gets beaten up and thrown out of the room. Following this incident, their alchemy class is canceled. So, the girls decide to have lunch and wait for their next class. While they're eating and chatting peacefully, Glenn joins them to talk about the food with Rumia. Noticing that Sistine is quiet, he asks her to share her complaints about him. Just as she opens her mouth to respond, he shoves a spoonful of his food into her mouth, making her furious again. In the next class, Glenn continues to show a lack of motivation in his teaching. Sistine can't take it anymore, so she challenges him to a magic duel, which he accepts. They both agree to a rule for the duel. Only the shock bolt spell will be used. This causes a buzz among the other students as they debate who's more likely to win. They agree that whoever can shorten the shock bolt spell and cast it faster will be the victor. Sistine is scared and unsure if she will win. However, she decides that her fight is for a noble cause and that she must stand her ground because she can't tolerate the teacher's behavior any longer. To everyone's surprise, the teacher takes an early hit in the duel, and after 2 more strikes, he loses to Sistine. She then demands that he act like a proper teacher from now on. His response is that he will simply cut her some slack moving forward. Glenn is very firm about his views on teaching. During one of his classes, a student asks a question he can't answer, and Sistine offers to respond, saying Glenn doesn't appreciate magic. Glenn snaps back, questioning the value of magic, and mindlessly claims it has no real essence. He argues that people only worship it without reason and insists it's only good for killing. He believes that while killing someone with your bare hands is tough, magic makes it easier to kill many at once. He reinforces his argument by pointing out that many murder cases involve magic. This rant gets him slapped by Sistine, who was in tears as he spoke, and reacted out of frustration. Embarrassed and upset, she runs out of the class. Glenn goes for a walk to think about what happened with Sistine and finds Rumia trying to activate a magic circle. He approaches her and tells her she's wrong for trying to use that circle. Rumia apologizes and starts to clean it up, but Glenn encourages her to keep going and assists her. After that, they walk and share a bit about their pasts. Rumia explains why she's so passionate about magic, saying it will allow her to positively impact humanity. She also shares that magic will help her keep her promise to Sistine, whose family rescued and took her in when a group of evil mages tried to capture her. Rumia mentions how Sistine's family inspired her to learn magic, and asks Glenn to apologize to Sistine because magic creates a special bond between her and her grandfather. Sistine overhears them, and recalls her father on his deathbed. He was a mage who died before he could uncover the mysteries of Melgalius's Sky Castle. The next day, Glenn shows up early, surprising the students. He even apologizes to Sistine, and gives an extensive lesson on the shock bolt spell, which they previously thought he didn't know. They're shocked to learn there's so much they don't know about magic, so he enlightens praises them and encourages them not just to memorize spells but to be more creative, which will help them become better mages. News of Glenn's sudden improvement spreads quickly. Cecilia Kun brags about him to the headmaster, much to Hallie Kun's annoyance. The next morning, two intimidating men break into the class, looking for Rumia. Everyone denies knowing Rumia, and Sistine confronts them about their lack of courtesy. After several threats, Rumia reveals herself, and the men admit they know who she is, but just wanted to keep asking so they could kill stubborn people until she showed herself. They then grab her and Sistine. One of them takes Sistine to a dark corner and tries to molest her when Glenn arrives. He assumes they've been making out and tries to excuse himself. Just before he leaves, Sistine calls out for him to save her from her attacker. As he approaches, she tells him to run away, warning that he might be no match for the assailant. Confused, Glenn asks if she wants him to rescue her or run away. He chooses to rescue her and uses the Fool's card, a spell that cancels magic, to ensure neither of them can use magic on each other. He then fights the assailant with his fists. The assailant is surprised by Glenn's strength, even without magic. In the end, Glenn beats him, ties him up, and locks him in a cell to be questioned further about their attack on the academy. Glenn just beat up Sustine's attacker and asks if Sistine is okay. She says she is fine and is about to say more when he interrupts, thinking she wants to mention he has no right to teach others. However, Sistine clarifies that she wasn't going to say that. Instead, she points out that his pants are down. He looks down and realizes he isn't wearing his pants properly. In the next scene, Glenn interrogates the locked-up attacker, trying to investigate the break-in while Sistine stands beside him. He notices the man's tattoo and discovers the attack was done by researchers of Divine Wisdom, a secret society of evil mages. He contacts Cecilia through his bracelet, and they both agree it's shocking that the terrorists dared to break into the academy, and they must have had an accomplice to pull it off. While they investigate, a portal opens next to Glenn and Sistine, and a large number of monsters called bone golems emerge. Together, they fight them off. Glenn teaches Sistine how to use her magic better during the battle, and then he uses his magic to amplify hers, activating an extinction spell that wipes out all the bone golems. After that, Rake, another evil mage, appears to attack them. Glenn asks Sistine for help with a dispelling spell. Before she can agree, he pushes her off the building to the ground, but then she realizes that if he wanted to get rid of her, he wouldn't have asked for her help in the first place. So she figures the push was a distraction and rushes back to the fight to help Glenn with the dispelling force he had asked for earlier. She dispels the knives that were stabbed into Glenn's body, while he takes one of the knives and stabs it into Rake's heart, killing him. Glenn loses a lot of strength in the fight and passes out. While he's unconscious, Sistine takes care of him until he regains his strength. Once he recovers, Glenn talks to Cecilia to confirm Rumia's location, which is the teleportation link in the school tower. He heads to the teleportation tower where Rumia is being held. When he arrives, he discovers that the previous teacher, Huey, is responsible for the attacks on the school and plans to use himself as a human bomb to destroy it, with Rumia being a key part of the operation. He activates the operation using a spell cage, and even though Glenn tries to fight it using the Fool's card, Huey tells him that he won't have enough time to defeat him and rescue Rumia if he uses the Fool card. So, Glenn decides to use his magical virtue called mana to write modifying spells on the magic circle to break Rumia free from her spell cage. Huey points out that there are 5 spell cages, which is more than Glenn expected, and he might not have enough mana to modify all 5 in time to set Rumia free. After neutralizing the 4th spell cage, Glenn realizes he doesn't have much strength left, so he passes out while trying to free her. Luckily, he collapses near the edge of the spell cage, close enough for Rumia to reach him. She reaches out and transfers some of her virtue to him until he revives and starts canceling the spell again. Once he finishes, he confronts Huey and beats him up to teach him a lesson for his crimes. Zelos, an Imperial guard, is talking with the Imperial maid and expresses concern that Her Majesty, the Queen, plans to go to the Alonzo Empire, especially since they just had a terrorist incident. The maid reminds him that the incident involved Rumia, who is actually Princess Ermiana, and that the Queen is worried about the princess's safety. They are both called to see the Queen, and Zelos pledges to protect her as they prepare for the uncertain journey, even during the competition. He asks for confirmation about the girl in question, and the Queen confirms it's Princess Ermiana, who was declared dead, and only a few at the academy knew the truth. Zelos reminds her to be careful so that Rumia's true identity as Princess Ermiana doesn't get revealed. The Queen assures him she's aware of that, and Zelos apologizes for giving unasked for advice. The Queen reflects on Rumia, remembering how sad it's been since she last saw her 3 years ago. In her heart, she believes Rumia hates her and doubts she will ever forgive her, but she wishes for Rumia's health wherever she is. In class, Sistine and Rumia announce the categories for the upcoming competition so interested students can join in. However, none seem interested, which worries Sistine since the competition is next week. Even though Rumia encourages everyone to give it their all, the other students are convinced they'll fail no matter what they do. They express that with the Queen visiting, it would be embarrassing to participate and perform poorly. As they debate participating, Glenn walks in and says he can solve the issue. The girls brush him off, believing he always messes things up. He tells them he'll use his charm as their instructor to help them win. He then splits them into groups based on the participation categories. Some students argue that they prefer different categories. However, he argues claims they aren't suitable for the ones they want. Instead, the groups he assigned would best fit their abilities. Hearing this, they start to pay attention to him and agree to stick with the assigned categories. While he continues setting up the groups, Sistine and Rumia realize that for him to pair them so well, he must have been paying attention to them the whole time, despite acting indifferent. What they don't know is that Glenn had met with the headmaster earlier, telling him he was broke and needed an advance on his payment. The headmaster replied that the only way to get a faster payment was by earning a special bonus for the teacher whose class won the competition. Jibu, one of the students, suggests a different approach he believes would help their class win. He proposes that only the top students participate, rather than pairing up everyone. Glenn thinks about this suggestion, but Sistine interrupts, insisting that having everyone involved is better, even if it means they all struggle together doing what they're best at. Glenn sits alone, frustrated that he has to work with all his students, while others focus only on the best. He watches sadly as other classes practice skillfully for the competition, then goes off to find a practice space for his own class. At the practice area, he runs into Hallie, who tells him to clear out so his class can practice. Glenn asks Hallie if they can at least practice under the tree, but Hallie refuses. Irritated, Glenn warns Hallie not to underestimate his class and challenges him to a bet. The wager is that the losing teacher must pay the winning teacher 3 months' salary. The moment he makes the challenge, Glenn feels regret. Deep down, he fears his class might lose. Hallie accepts the bet, and they both commit to outdoing each other. As days pass, Glenn puts in a lot of effort to prepare his students for the competition. His dedication catches the attention of his students, especially Sistine and Rumia, who note that he's usually aloof but has become serious for the competition. At night, Rumia looks at her locket and recalls the time she and her parents were attacked when she was a child. While she examines the locket, Sistine comes in and tells her dinner is ready. She asks what Rumia is staring at, but Rumia brushes her off, saying it's nothing, and puts the locket away. At the dinner table, Sistine's parents apologize to the girls, explaining that they tried to cancel work to watch them at the competition, but another job came up, and they can't make it. The girls reassure them that they understand and shouldn't worry about it. On the day of the competition, the queen heads down to the Empire. As they travel, a maid notices the queen's pendant might reveal too much about her identity, so she suggests changing it to keep Rumia's identity a secret. The competition kicks off as planned. Rumia recognizes the pendant on the queen's neck. Class 2, which belongs to Glenn, wins the first round, delighting Cecilia and irritating Hallie. Meanwhile, Hallie secretly schemes with a guard. In the second round, Class 2 wins again. In the third round of mental defense, Rumia competes against Jael from Class 5, a longtime winner who tries to convince her to quit. However, Rumia narrowly defeats him. While the competition continues, the queen watches Rumia with pride, happy to see how well she's performing. The commentator cheers on Class 2 for their amazing performance. Meanwhile, some spectators at the competition seem to recognize Glenn. They knew him before he became a teacher at the academy, and Riel, a lady, wanted to confront him to settle scores, but Albert wouldn't let her. She asks if Albert doesn't want to meet Glenn as well, and he replies that there are many things he'd like to discuss with Glenn, but their mission to protect the queen comes first, especially with some suspicious activities happening. During a short break, Glenn takes a walk when Lynn, a student from his class, approaches him for help. She confesses that she's worried she won't do well in the category he assigned her. He asks if she'd like to swap with someone else, particularly in the transmutation category, and she happily agrees. However, she voices concern that if she swaps, the other person might not be ready for the new category, which could slow everyone down. Glenn reassures her that what matters is that she enjoys competing because it's not just a competition, it's also a magical festival. He then gives her a special talk about self-illusion magic and even transforms into Rumia to better explain how the magic works. While he's still in Rumia's form, Sistine brings him lunch, thinking he's Rumia. He's super hungry and eagerly takes a slice to eat, but he doesn't even take a bite before the real Rumia arrives. Sistine, realizing what's going on, casts a spell to reveal his true form. She then accidentally sends him flying into a nearby bush. He sits there, hungry and confused about what just happened. Rumia comes over with the food and offers it to him. Glenn devours the food and thanks Rumia, calling the guy who rejected the food a fool. As they head back to the competition ground, they run into the queen. She came looking for Glenn, who, without seeing her, says he's busy and can't talk to anyone. But when he turns and sees who it is, he shows her the proper respect. Back at the competition, Zelos, the Imperial Guard, notices the queen is missing and orders other guards to search for her. Cecilia laughs, knowing she helped the queen sneak away to visit Glenn using her magic. A serving maid approaches Cecilia while she's laughing, revealing something that makes her gasp. The queen chats with Glenn, reminiscing about how he was a great mage but unfortunately lost his duty and rank disgracefully. Glenn insists he quit on his own, and that she shouldn't feel sorry for him or bow down to someone like him. He then asks why she came to see him without any guards. She approaches Rumia, calls her Ermiana, comments on how much she's grown, says she missed her, and asks how things are at the Sistine family house. Rumia admits it feels like a dream come true to see the queen again. However, after thinking it over, Rumia pretends she doesn't know the woman and tells her she's mistaken. She clarifies that she's not Ermiana, her name is Rumia. The queen feels sad watching this and apologizes for the mix-up, explaining she just mistook her for the deceased princess. With that, Rumia runs away, and the queen heads back to her spot at the competition grounds. On her way, a group of soldiers led by Zelos blocks her path. He informs her that, due to a certain situation, they need to detain her somewhere for a while. Meanwhile, Albert watches everything between Zelos and the Queen unfold supernaturally from where he is. He informs Real about what he just saw, and together they come up with a plan to keep an eye on the Queen to ensure her safety. Glenn ponders the encounter he just witnessed between the Queen and Rumia. His thoughts are interrupted when Sistine approaches, asking about Rumia, who hasn't returned since taking food to Glenn. He tells her about the meeting between Rumia and the Queen, and explains that Rumia would probably want some time alone after that. He adds that he'll go look for her anywhere since he feels strong from eating the sandwiches Rumia had brought him earlier. Glenn finds Rumia sitting under a tree, staring at her locket. She doesn't notice him as she continues to gaze at it while he watches her. Finally, he breaks the silence, asking what she's looking at. She reveals it's a locket that's always been with her, but she doesn't know much about it because there's no picture inside to tell her who might have given it to her or any other detail about it. She expresses how strange it is that she's kept it with her all this time, despite not knowing anything about it. She then asks if he knows about her and the Queen, and he tells her he does. She inquires what he thinks she should have done in that situation. She elaborates, saying she was born special, and her existence poses a serious threat to her family, as she could be used like a human bomb against them. She tells him that, while she understands, part of her is still angry at the Queen, her mother, for abandoning her. He then asks what her true feelings are telling her to do in this situation. She admits that she doesn't understand her true feelings at that moment. Glenn reveals that he was once a mage in the Imperial Army, and because of his job, he frequently visited the royal court. He adds that the ruler of the court always wore the same locket that Rumia is wearing. He tells her that the answer to her question has been right in front of her all along, and that she needs to confront her feelings instead of running away from them. She says she's scared to meet the Queen, her mother, and begs Glenn to accompany her. As they head to meet the Queen, Imperial guards intercept them, trying to arrest Rumia for attempting to murder the Queen. Rumia gives up to the guards, and while Glenn tries to fight back, he gets hit by one of the guards and loses consciousness. The guards take Rumia to a tree and tie her to it. They instruct her to close her eyes and stay still, warning that if she moves, she'll face a worse fate, which might cause them to miss their target. Rumia agrees and closes her eyes. While her eyes are shut, she hears a disturbance and opens them to find the guards lying on the ground. When her restraints are removed, she sees that Glenn is the one who saved her. She asks him why he came to her aid, knowing she didn't want that. He explains that he did it because Sistine would have scolded him if he abandoned her. He then helps her realize that if the Queen wanted to execute her, there would need to be a trial first. While they're still talking, another group of guards charges in to arrest them. Glenn picks up Rumia and casts a spell to teleport them to safety. They land on a rooftop and keep running, hoping to find the Queen and discuss the recent events. Glenn suddenly remembers that he can speak to the Queen without physically meeting her, so he goes to a room and activates his contact bracelet to reach Cecilia. However, Cecilia sadly informs him there's nothing she can do or say at that moment. She speaks in codes that he struggles to interpret but realizes something is off. He tries to come up with a plan to meet the Queen, remembering that she's always surrounded by an army, led by Zelos. While he thinks of a way to reach the Queen, a door opens, and two people enter the room. He recognizes them as Albert and Real. The episode starts with a scene showing what the Imperial maid had earlier told Cecilia that made her gasp. She said the new pendant she gave the Queen to replace the usual locket was death-cursed, and that the Queen's life would be used for the benefit of the researchers of wisdom. At that moment, Zelos walks in but remains silent. The maid then tells Cecilia that the only way to save the Queen is through Glenn, and it has to happen at sundawn. Meanwhile, Rumia and Glenn are still facing fierce resistance from Real. Glenn is surprised to see the court mages show up. He tries hard to protect Rumia, but Real is relentless. She casts a spell that creates a powerful charging blade and charges at him. Unable to dodge or counter, Glenn uses a mirroring spell to send her magic back at her. The strike hits her in the head, and she immediately passes out. Seeing his partner on the floor, Albert approaches Glenn, commenting that it's been a while since they last saw him. Real regains consciousness and receives a message from Glenn to ease the pain from the strike. Rumia is confused and asks who they are. Glenn introduces them. Albert, a member of the Royal Court Mage Corps Special Forces, is known as Executioner Number 17, and Real is Number 7, known as the Chariot. He assures Rumia that they can be trusted and that she should relax. They discuss the incident at the competition and how the Imperial Guards have placed the Queen under surveillance. Albert mentions they are plotting an operation to eliminate the former princess. Glenn asks about Cecilia, and Albert informs him that she's still at the stand but isn't plotting anything and can't do much about the attack, even though she could easily deal with one or two of the offending guards. Glenn looks confused, trying to figure out why they decided to target Rumia at that moment. Albert is uncertain as well, and Real states that instead of thinking too much, they should act quickly, since she has a plan that could help. Glenn asks for the details of the plan, and she impulsively shares the usual idea she tends to give, everyone rushing in without thinking. After hearing this, Glenn playfully squeezes her ears and tells her to stop coming up with ridiculous plans all the time. When Rumia sees Glenn playfully tugging on Real's ears, she observes that they must be very good friends, but Glenn brushes it off while admitting he's just glad he doesn't have to fight them. He then asks them to help him, recalling that Cecilia had mentioned finding a way to the queen. Albert questions why he would take meaning from what she said, since it might have been a thoughtless remark. Glenn replies that Cecilia was executioner number 21 and her best partner, so in a situation like theirs, she wouldn't just throw out anything that didn't offer a useful hint for their mission. Glenn notes that if they disregard Cecilia's suggestion, things at the stand would only worsen, so it's better to work with their best option. They agree on this. At the competition site, the students of Class 2 are panicking because Glenn and Rumia are nowhere to be found. Albert and Real approach the students and introduce themselves. They reassure them not to worry and explain that Glenn is in a tough situation that prevents him from joining them. Albert lets them know that even though Glenn can't make it, he's sending them a message. He tells the students that he'll be taking Glenn's place for the time being. All Glenn wanted was for them to win the competition. Sistine is about to resist when Real touches her hand and asks for her understanding. At that close distance, Sistine immediately recognizes who they are and tells the rest of the class to follow Albert's orders, because it didn't matter who was in charge. What really mattered was their team spirit. She also points out that if they fail, Glenn will constantly make fun of them. The students think about how annoying that would be and decide they'd rather do their best to avoid such a situation. The commentator announces the start of the next round and states that Class 2 is losing momentum. Hearing this, Hallie feels pleased, especially when he notices Glenn is absent. He believes Class 2 will fail without Glenn. He then urges Seita, his student, to step up and ensure they crush Class 2. Seita transforms into a magnificent dragon, earning a very high score. Seeing Seita's achievement makes Nebu nervous that she might not perform well. While she watches Seita with anxiety, Albert approaches her and comforts her, almost as if he can read her thoughts. He reassures her that he believes she's worked hard on her performance. He tells her the last thing she needs to do is relax, assuring her that her best effort is all they need. He adds that if she does her best and fails, he'll take down anyone who tries to blame her. This gives her confidence and reminds her of Glenn. Feeling empowered, she steps into the competition ring as the crowd cheers, eager to see her transformation. She casts a spell that turns her into Turks, a sacred angel. This stunning performance earns her an even higher score than Seita's. Meanwhile, Glenn and Rumia are still on the run, looking for a way out of their predicament. Zelos orders the Imperial forces to stop wasting time and find the princess immediately, instructing them to kill her when they do. The competition has now reached the final round, where teams must duel against each other. Sistine is the last to face a member of Team 1, and Albert promises her a reward if she wins the duel. During the first strike, Sistine takes a hit, which motivates Henkel from Class 1 to push harder and defeat her. While she struggles to regain her footing, her teammates encourage her, and she remembers her promise to Glenn through Albert that she would make sure they win. Strengthened, she stands up and uses the modified spells Glenn had taught them. The force of the spell is too much for Henkel to handle, and it knocks him down, making Sistine the winner of that round. With a score of 200 to 195, Class 2 beats Class 1 and wins the competition. They are then called to receive their medal and prize for being champions, and Albert and Riel head to the Queen to accept the award as the leaders of the winning team. However, they aren't the official leaders, so there's hesitation in giving them the award. To their shock, the Albert and Riel in front of them transform, revealing their true selves as Glenn and Rumia. They had swapped forms before arriving at the competition. Seeing this, the Imperial Guard orders them to grab Glenn and Rumia immediately, but Cecilia steps in, using a barrier to block the soldiers. Glenn informs the Queen about the terrible things her guard has been doing, trying to kill Rumia, and insists she put an end to it right away. The guards argue that Rumia's death is essential to protect the future of the country, and urge the Queen to explain this to Glenn. The Queen then orders Rumia to be executed, stating it's the right thing to do, and expresses regret about having her. Rumia is devastated to learn this is her mother's decision, while Glenn is confused about why a mother would want her innocent child to die. He recalls that he only remembered the Queen wearing her locket and notices the pendant she has on now is new. He suggests she take it off, but she refuses, making him realize the necklace is cursed. Glenn charges at the guard and simultaneously yanks the necklace off the Queen's neck. She suddenly regains her senses as Glenn fights the Imperial soldier. Glenn then explains the conditions of the curse on the necklace. It shouldn't be pulled, explained, or exceeded a time limit, or the wearer would die. The Imperial Guard questions why the Queen didn't die when it was yanked off, and Glenn clarifies he activated a fool's card to prevent the dark magic from affecting her. He tells the Queen to honestly confess her feelings for her daughter. Struggling to find the right words, the Queen rushes to Rumia in tears and hugs her tightly. She apologizes and expresses how relieved she is that Rumia is safe. In another scene, Albert shares the details of his mission with Riel in the Alonzo Empire. He mentions investigating the Imperial Guard due to their suspicious movements and looking into everyone around the Queen. He confronts the Imperial maid, asking why she tried to kill the princess. She coldly responds that death is the princess's fate, then casts a spell and teleports away, evading Riel's deadly strike. They note that if the Queen's maid was a traitor, it means that researchers of divine wisdom have infiltrated deep into the Empire's core. Glenn feels dismayed at this finding, while Albert and Riel leave to strategize and prepare for any future threats. The Queen gets ready to depart, saying goodbye to Cecilia and asking her to take good care of Rumia while she's away. As Rumia and Glenn walk home, Rumia asks how he knew his mom didn't mean what she said while wearing the necklace. He tells her he knew how much her mother loved her, explaining that she had hired him 3 years ago to watch over her, and he promised to do so. She thanks him for keeping his promise and vows to always be by his side. Glenn warns her to be cautious about her behavior since their enemies haven't all been defeated. He mentions that he just earned 3 months' salary from a bet, but then gets interrupted when he runs into a surprise party thrown by his students. They celebrate joyfully for the success of a conquest. However, Glenn realizes they overspent on the party and throws a fit about it. In the first scene, Glenn and Sistine are training in the park, but Sistine can't handle the intense training anymore. Glenn understands and tells her it's not her fault since she's been sheltered her whole life. He gives her his jersey, and the scent from it makes Sistine flustered. Meanwhile, Sensei continues the training hard, even speeding up as he hits the wood for hand combat training. After training, Sistine expresses her frustrations to Sensei, saying she expected to learn new spells or increase her power level. Glenn explains that the training is beneficial as it sharpens her skills for attacking and defending in combat. He insists that if Sistine wants to protect Rumia, she needs to improve her power. Sistine tells Glenn he should teach her military-grade magic, which scares her a little. This moment of hesitation shows Glenn that Sistine will use the magic wisely. Sistine bows her head and thanks Glenn for teaching her. The next day at the academy, Glenn is sitting by the waterfall looking worn out. Sistine and Rumia come up to him, concerned for his health, but Glenn downplays it to reassure them. Suddenly, from behind the two girls, Rel charges at Glenn with her enormous sword. This surprises Glenn, but he manages to hold the sword back. Rel says it's just a way of greeting comrades from the war that Albert taught her. The crew learns that Rel has been transferred to their school. She declares her intention to protect Glenn, but he insists she should protect Rumia instead. Riel insists on protecting Glenn, so he picks her up and shakes her like a baby, reminding her of her mission. Afterward, Glenn introduces Rettel to the classroom. Everyone initially is excited about her cuteness, but her social awkwardness dims the enthusiasm. Someone in class asks about her family, and they find out she has none. Someone else from the back asks Rel about her relationship with Sensei, and she boldly declares that he is her everything, shocking the whole class. In the next scene, the class practices the magic spell Shock Bolt to destroy a dummy. Sistine does exceptionally well, destroying the dummy in one shot while her classmates cheer her on. Next up is Revel. She tries her best but struggles to use Shock Bolt. She asks if she can use a different spell, and when Glenn agrees, she uses a dangerous spell to destroy the dummy, scaring the other students. When the class returns from the session, it's break time, and everyone is sitting in their little groups, but Riel is alone. Rumia and Sistine invite her to join them, and she agrees, albeit reluctantly. Riel spots a strawberry tart in the cafeteria and eagerly eats it. As she sits, the class gathers around her and starts to realize she might not be so dangerous after all. Later, in the school library, Glenn is talking with Celica. He wonders what the military is thinking by sending Revel to the school to protect it, but he feels positive since it will help her socialize with her peers. After that, the boys and girls from Glenn's class ride on 2 separate carriages. The boys are feeling down, but Glenn perks them up by giving hints about their destination. The group reaches a ship port where the students look for things to buy. Glenn bumps into Albert, who warns him about Rhi, but Glenn reassures him that it's in the past and she's not dangerous anymore. The class boards one of the ships, which takes them to Cineria Island. Glenn has motion sickness, but he chooses to hold it in because he's excited about the beach in Cineria and the chance to see the girls in swimsuits. Later, the boys and girls are in their swimsuits having a great time as Glenn gives them the opportunity to enjoy themselves. Rel, Rumia, and Sistine invite Sensei to play volleyball, and he agrees. They play and have fun until it gets dark. At night, the boys plan to sneak into the girls' rooms, but Glenn catches them. He tells them to go back, but the boys refuse and duel him instead, having a great time as they fight each other. Just upstairs on the balcony of the girls' rooms, they watch the boys excitedly battling before going inside to play board games. Glenn easily defeats all the boys. Later, Glenn goes to the beach to clear his head under the midnight sky, and he's joined by Rel, Rumia, and Sistine, who run toward the ocean to have fun playing in the water. Glenn remembers Albert's warning but can't feel afraid of Riel. The girls have their fun and then go to bed. Not long after, Glenn leaves the beach to walk home, and on his way, he meets Rel, who wants to talk. Glenn asks her why she left the Imperial Mage Corp, and she tells him that without him, life doesn't feel worth living. Glenn wants her to let go of that thought, but Rel becomes visibly upset because she wants to protect him, and he keeps refusing her help. She blames the girls for not wanting her protection and runs away crying while Glenn watches. In the next scene, a fire burns as strands go through the flames. Then, there's a switch, and on a mountain cliff, a creepy woman in a maid's dress says her organization is looking into that matter. The man informs her that preparations have been made for the amplifier, which will help them achieve their goal. The episode starts with Glenn's class walking through a forest. Sistine is worried about Rumia and Revel since they both look exhausted. Riel stumbles over a tree branch, and Sistine and Rumia rush to help her, but Riel swats Rumia's hand away, shouting that she hates everyone and doesn't want anyone touching her. Rel walks off, leaving the girls concerned about what could have triggered her sudden outburst. Glenn reassures them that Rel is just in a fragile state right now, which explains her behavior. The class arrives at their destination, a white research facility. The professor in charge warmly greets the group, and they start touring the facility. Rumia and Sistine decide to give Riel some space, hoping that some distance will calm her down. During the tour, the professor explains the essence of white alchemy, describing it as a field that merges alchemy with white magic, with the main focus being the essence of life itself. Later, in another room, the professor shows the kids some bizarre animals in tubes and explains that experiments are done using different combinations of plants and animals to create chimeras. The class watches these odd-looking creatures with excitement. Sistine shares her aspiration to major in magic archaeology in the future, even though her enthusiasm has been diminished by the facility. Rumia mentions her desire to pursue magical beauty, feeling it's wrong to manipulate life as it could lead to dark consequences. During their conversation, Rumia enthusiastically talks about a government-funded project called Project Revive Life, but the professor interjects, impressed by her knowledge. He explains that Project Revive Life involves creating a body through alchemy, using a person's gene code to bring them back. The astral code is used to transform memories into data needed for the revival process. The girls don't see it as true revival since it's just parts of people pieced together. While the project has its benefits, it requires sacrificing 3 lives for one revival, which is why the research has been banned at various centers. Sistine asks the professor if there's any other ingredient needed, and he mentions that the only other ingredient not previously mentioned is original magic. An original magic wielder would make the process much smoother. After their chat, the class heads into town. Sistine seizes the opportunity to invite Ripley to join them, but Ripley quickly shuts her down. Rel runs off into the town, filled with resentment towards Sistine and Rumia, blaming them for taking Glenn away from her. Glenn, meanwhile, goes to the beach and cries her heart out. At the same time, in a building in town, Glenn tells the girls not to lose patience with Riel, reminding them that she's just a child, before going off to find her as her teacher. On the beach, Riel sees her long-lost brother and is thrilled as Albert watches the scene unfold from the forest. Albert tries to walk away, but Eleanor Chalet traps him with a barrier. She offers Albert a steamy light, but he refuses and attacks her. Eleanor dodges all of Albert's attacks easily, then screams in madness with her torn clothes, raising an army of undead to attack Albert. Albert casts a field of lightning and quickly gets rid of the undead. Eleanor heals her wounds effortlessly and tells Albert that he's much stronger than she expected. Back at the mansion, Rumina and Sistine discuss what happened earlier with Rel and wonder what really motivates her. Sistine then tells Rumina she's going to go grocery shopping since they're both starving. At the beach, Rel can't believe her brother is right in front of her. He tells her about his predicament and how getting rid of Glenn for the group holding him captive will grant him freedom. Riel is hesitant, battling her thoughts and emotions when Glenn arrives on the scene. He quickly separates her from her brother, preparing to capture him with Riel. But before he can act, Rel stabs him from behind. She kills Glenn and tells his corpse that she lives for her brother. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, Albert and Eleanor are still fighting until Eleanor leaves abruptly. In the next scene, Sistine walks home excitedly with groceries she bought from the market. She enters her room and is met with a horrifying scene. Rumina has been stabbed by Revel, who tells Sistine that Rumina isn't dead yet and that she has killed Glenn. This revelation devastates Sistine, leaving her in shock. Riel declares that she is Sistine's enemy and attempts to drag Rumina's unconscious body away. Sistine threatens to blast Riel, but Riel isn't scared. She challenges Sistine to shoot, but Sistine is paralyzed by fear as Relly picks up Rumina and escapes. Sistine cries, overwhelmed by her inability to shoot Rel because of her fear, just as Albert brings Glenn's limp body into the house. He turns on the light to examine the body, causing Sistine to scream at the sight of Glenn's massive injury. Albert tells her to calm down because Glenn is still alive, albeit barely. Sistine can't control her emotions and cries deeply from the pain. However, Albert urges her to stop crying if she wants to save Glenn, as they need to focus on helping him. Sistine wipes her tears and asks Albert what he needs her to do. Albert suggests performing the white magic ritual, which requires a lot of mana, but he will connect with Sistine to use her mana as well. He tells Sistine to give Glenn CPR. She hesitates but eventually goes through with it as Albert draws magic circles. Meanwhile, in a distant place, Rumina wakes up, tied up with chains binding her hands above her head. She sees Rel and learns that Glenn has been killed by her. The episode starts with Rettel talking to the bound Rumina. She tells her that she didn't want to kill Glenn, but without her brother, she doesn't know what she's living for. Glenn wakes up and finds himself in the girl's room, all bandaged up, while Sistine is at the foot of of the bed, exhausted from trying to bring him back from the dead. He immediately asks Albert to explain what's going on. Albert reminds Glenn of his earlier warning about Revel and tells him about the network of spies set up to monitor the White Alchemy schools. Glenn is angry that Rumina was used as bait and tells Albert he can't forgive him for following such orders from his superiors. Albert suggests they be ruthless in their approach and says he'll eliminate Riel if he sees her, but Glenn refuses. He insists he'll change Rel's mindset, even if he has to do it with his own 2 hands. Albert is surprised that Glenn can say that after he betrayed his comrades and ran away, but he forgives him. Glenn thanks Sistine for her kindness while she sleeps before he and Albert rush off to save Rumina. Meanwhile, in the villain's lair, Rumina screams in agony as her power is drained by the villain's machine. The leader is thrilled and praises Riel's brother for bringing Rumina to them. Their evil project, Project Revive Life, can now be completed because of Riel's brother. He's amazed by the brother's abilities and tells Rumina she should be grateful because she'll help with their research. The leader claims that while she thinks the researchers of divine wisdom are evil, he believes the royal family is even worse. Eleanor interrupts him and says they should continue with the experiment. Rel stays quiet, prompting her brother to check on her. Meanwhile, the group senses Glenn and Albert entering their lair and watches them through magical screens. The leader isn't worried about facing them. He believes his creatures can handle it. He releases a chimera lion with wings against them, but Albert swiftly defeats it in one hit, frustrating the leader as it went down too easily. Albert and Glenn press on to save Rumina, while Albert explains that these creatures are chimeras that the military has long been experimenting on. The scene briefly shifts to the girls' dorm, where Sistine is awake and wondering if her training has paid off. A group of girls rushes into her room, eager but scared when they see the blood and mess. Back in the lair, Glenn and Albert fight a chimera turtle with a crystal shell. It's tougher but still easily defeated by both of them. Its defeat angers the leader, who storms out, vowing to end Glenn's life. The scene then returns to the hotel, where the class interrogates Sistine, but she can't provide much detail apart from the fact that Glenn plans to bring Rumina and Revel back. The group wants to pursue their teacher due to their worries, but Sistine convinces them to trust in Glenn's abilities and leave it to him. Glenn and Albert come face to face with the leader of the bad guys, who has modified his body. Glenn leaves Albert to handle it. Rel, convinced by her brother, agrees to fight Glenn, saying it's her reason for living. Glenn bursts into the room to confront Revel and tries to explain that her brother is dead, but she ignores him and attacks with her weapon, declaring that her brother is everything to her. Glenn asks Rel to tell him her brother's name, but she struggles to think of anything. He uses gravity control to hold her down, then fights Riel's brother, who turns out to be a fake, and destroys the machine. Rel starts regaining some old memories and remembers her real brother's name is Sion. She recalls that Sion was a repentant member of the evil group, but was killed in the lab by another member who deemed he had fulfilled his purpose. Glenn tells her she is the girl who was created in those labs using people's lives, and that she was formed in the research of Revive Life. After this, the fake brother calls her trash, upsetting Glenn, who attacks but can't land a hit. The fake brother showcases new weapons different girls, resembling Raffle but lacking emotions. These weapons overwhelm Glenn, but with Rebel's help, he defeats them. Glenn beats up the fake brother and warns him to stay away from his student. Meanwhile, Albert keeps attacking the group's leader with wave after wave, burning him to dust. The leader screams in agony, overwhelmed by Albert's power. The group eventually returns, and a touching moment occurs as the girls cry upon seeing each other. Rel, with tears in her eyes, asks for forgiveness, knowing she hurt her friends. Sistine forgives her easily, just happy to see Rel back to normal, and gives her a big hug. Afterward, they head back to the beach where the kids play volleyball. While they have fun, Glenn sits with Albert discussing what matters most to them. Glenn feels his wish to protect the innocence and joy of his class is fulfilled as he watches them enjoy themselves. Meanwhile, Eleanor, in a distant place, is thrilled as she holds a gem containing the entire Project Revival Life ritual. The group is still at the beach having fun when the ball lands near Glenn. He's invited to join them but declines. He tosses the ball back to Sistine, and then Albert points out that Sistine looks a lot like Sarah Silvers. In the next scene, Eleanor finds herself in a strange world, surrounded by oddly stacked rocks in a pink sky. These rocks have strange writings on them. She is talking to her Grandmaster and asks what should be done about those in the organization who want to bring Princess Hermania back to life. The Grandmaster tells her to handle them as she sees fit, adding that how each person chooses to live will define their story. Meanwhile, at Sistine's family home, the three girls are having a meal, and Sistine's parents are thrilled to see them. They ask Rel what she thinks of Glenn, and she praises him, saying everything starts and ends with Glenn. Sistine's parents are happy to hear this because it suggests Glenn is a good person. Rel enjoys her meal enthusiastically. After dinner, the three girls gather at the top of the house, and Rela feels guilty about her past actions. She tries to apologize again, weighed down by the pain she caused her friends. Sistine hugs her tightly and reassures her that it's okay. It's all in the past and all her previous mistakes have been forgiven. As this unfolds, Rebel begins to cry, and Rumina joins in for a group hug. The next day, Sistine is walking down a library aisle carrying heavy books when she bumps into a boy and drops one. Professor Alphonia picks it up, intrigued because it was written by Sistine's grandfather. Sistine expresses her desire to continue her grandfather's work. Alphonia shares a personal thought, saying that those who achieve something are the fools who keep pushing forward, while the wise are those who stop progressing and achieve nothing. After her statement, Alphonia wishes Sistine luck and walks away. Later, Sistine sees Glenn in the library. He asks if she's the one who revived him while he was unconscious. Sistine blushes as she remembers the kiss they shared to bring him back. Rumina and Rebel walk in and notice Sistine's red face. Rebel misreads the situation, thinking Glenn hurt Sistine, and attacks him with her conjured sword, throwing him out of the library. As Glenn lands outside, a carriage approaches, and horses nearly trample him. However, the rider casts a wind spell to lift Glenn off the ground. Once Glenn is safe, he gets down from the carriage and starts chatting with Sistine, asking who he is because he senses some chemistry between her and the young man. The young man introduces himself to Glenn as Leos Kalidos. He has been invited to their academy to be a guest instructor and claims that he is also Sistine's fiancé. Leo says that he and Sistine swore their futures to each other since they were kids. Glenn makes fun of Sistine, but Leos takes it seriously and sees it as an insult. Sistine calms him down, telling Leos that it's just a joke and that Glenn isn't serious. Afterward, Sistine calls Glenn by his name, which piques Leos' interest. Glenn is popular across different magic academies and is seen as a fast-rising, smart teacher who emphasizes the practical aspects of fundamental magic instead of the theoretical. Leos wants to listen in on one of his classes. He tells Sistine he is serious, making it known as her classmates watch in astonishment. Later, Glenn starts mocking Sistine again, calling her names and saying she's really lucky because of that. Sistine retaliates with a magic spell. In the next scene, the school leaders are surprised that they received a high-level professor like Leos to assist them, but Alphonia is skeptical for some reason. Later, Leo teaches a class on improving the quality of magic, explaining that in his classes, students will learn to increase their magical output. After his lecture, the class applauds in admiration of his teaching, while Glenn observes. Although Glenn admits the class was well done and educational, he feels that teaching the kids so much has its downsides. Even though they are more powerful now, they fail to grasp the potential impact of their magic. The shock bolt skill they know could kill someone, but the kids don't understand the meaning of that power, they just know the magic exists. Rumina hears Glenn talking to himself but reassures him that he has taught the class well, so none of his students can be that foolish. Glenn mocks Sistine, who is sitting on the other side of the class, but she can't respond as Leo approaches her to ask her honest opinion about his lecture. Leo suggests they take a walk together, and she agrees. As they stroll around the academy grounds, they reminisce about their past and how much has changed since they were younger. They don't notice Glenn, Rumina, and Rel watching them from behind the trees and bushes, eavesdropping on their conversation. Leos proposes to Sistine, but she tells him she can't marry him due to a promise she made to her grandfather when she was younger. She promised to unravel the mystery of Melgaliu's sky castle and wants to learn more magic before getting married. Leos hears her reasoning and tells her it's impossible and meaningless, saying a life spent pursuing such things will only bring her sadness. He suggests she support his research on military magic instead, but she refuses again. Their exchange prompts Glenn to stand up for Sistine, telling her to pursue her own path since she is the main character in her own story. Leos tells Glenn to stay out of it since it's none of his business, but Sistine counters that it is Glenn's business because they have sworn themselves to each other. Glenn goes further, claiming both of them shared a bed the previous night. This catches Sistine off guard, and she drags Glenn away. This annoys Leos, who challenges Glenn to a duel. Leos is excited about the duel because if he wins, he can marry Sistine and live a carefree life. He even gets the class involved, saying he will train them for the duel, insisting that they compete based on their skills as magic instructors. The class feels too weak to compete, but Glenn encourages them. In the evening, Glenn is at the bar with Albert. They discuss the events of earlier in the day before Albert brings up what he really wants to talk about. He tells Glenn that Angel's dust has been smuggled into the city and that he doesn't want Glenn to join the investigation. The mention of Angel disturbs both of them and brings back some bad memories. Glenn leaves Albert and is walking home when he remembers Sarah once again. Meanwhile, in a carriage on the other side of town, Leos talks with a shady-looking man, telling him everything is going according to plan. The two classes receive instructions about the duel from Harvest. He feels ashamed of Glenn, who is using the Noble Academy classes to duel over a woman. Harvest asks Leos to put Glenn in his place, as he holds him in high regard. Leos agrees and says he'll make Glenn pay. He approaches Sistine and tells her not to worry about him because he'll fight with everything he has to win her hand. This romantic declaration lifts the spirits of the entire class, especially when compared to Glenn's goal, which is to marry for wealth. The class even feels discouraged by Glenn's comments, and during this time, a classmate asks Sistine who she would like to marry. Sistine prefers Glenn but is too shy to admit it, so she runs away from the class. The duel starts immediately with a loud gong signaling the battle's beginning. Class 4, Leos's class, stands strong at first, knocking out a few members of Class 2, Glenn's class. Class 4 is expected to win, and they stand tall with power and precision that clearly surpasses Class 2. Leos has taught them effective strategies for modern mage combat, particularly the three-man cell tactic, where the frontline attacker attacks, the frontline defender defends, flanks, and the rear support adapts and supports from a distance. This strategy allows each member to focus on their roles, enhancing their effectiveness with overwhelming numbers. Leos makes a move on the battlefield, deploying more troops than Class 2 to each area to eliminate each unit. Everyone believes Class 4 should win given their stronger magic, superior numbers, and Leos's brilliant tactics. Yet, Class 2 surprisingly puts up a strong fight. Earlier, Glenn had told Class 2 they wouldn't be able to pull off the 3-man cell tactic, but he had a different plan for them. They formed 2-man cells to counter the 3-man cells, and it seems to be working. Upon noticing this, Leos instructs his class to back off and switch to long-range sniping from the hills. However, he discovers that one of his groups has been overpowered by Revel. He tells his group to head to the forest, but they encounter Glenn, who sets traps to catch members of Class 4. This sneaky tactic turns the tide in Class 2's favor. Watching this unfold, Sistine feels foolish for liking Glenn, while he laughs as members of Class 4 try to escape him and his class. Regardless, the battle ends in a draw because it doesn't conclude within the time limit. Glenn congratulates his class for keeping up with Class 4, while Leo scolds his class for not finishing off Class 2. Glenn advises him to take it easy on them, which annoys Leos, who then chooses to challenge Glenn again. They set the fight for the next morning. This confrontation irritates Sistine, but what bothers her most is that Glenn seems to want to marry her just to get rich. Glenn slaps Leos and leaves as the rest of the class heads to the carriages. In one carriage on their way back, Rumia and Sistine chat, and Rumia tells Sistine that Glenn isn't the type to duel someone just for money. She suggests Sistine have a one-on-one conversation with Glenn to understand what drives his actions. The next scene shows a dark alley in the city where Albert and some other men spot an Angel's drug addict, marking it as the 5th case witnessed. Not far away, Leos is fuming because he lost to Glenn but is excited about battling him the next day. Convinced that Glenn can't beat him in a one-on-one fight, he reveals his real motive for wanting to marry Glenn. He wants the main Klytos family to dominate the Branch family and secure his position as the next family leader. Later that night, Glenn is lost in thought, planning for the upcoming fight when Sistine confronts him, asking why he wants this duel. Hesitantly, Glenn admits the truth. She reminds him of Sarah, an old friend who encouraged him to become a mage, but whom he foolishly allowed to die. After her death, he gave up everything, becoming a recluse. Glenn wrestles with his motivations. He thinks it might be hope for Sistine, an appreciation for her determination, or a way to atone for Sarah by protecting Sistine's dreams. His anger flares because Leos belittled her aspirations, and he couldn't control himself. Sistine mentions that there might be some truth in what Leos said about her dream studying magic is daunting, and she fears losing hope. Still, if even one person supports her, she'll keep pushing towards her goal. Glenn gets full of himself, laughing and telling Sistine that as her teacher, it's his job to support his students' dreams. Leos interrupts them, revealing a piece of Glenn's past that infuriates him. Glenn tells Leos to leave, but Leos disregards him, claiming Glenn has no right to live in light with his blood-stained hands. He continues, suggesting Glenn's skills belong elsewhere, revealing him as a former member of the Imperial Mage Corps Special Forces, Zero, known as the Fool Glenn Raiders. Fed up, Glenn attacks Leos, but Leos quickly overpowers him using skills typical of an Imperial Mage. He employs a magical technique called Tulpa, which Sistine recognizes as the power to bring his imagination into reality. The Tulpas mercilessly assault Glenn, who can't defend himself from them because they're not a spell but a heightened imagination born from a trance. As a result, Glenn walks away defeated. Sistine tries to follow him, but Leos holds her back. When she tells him to let her go, Leos reveals his true colors, becoming aggressive toward her and threatening to make her vanish if she doesn't shut up. This frightens Sistine, but Leos doesn't stop there. He blackmails her with Rumia's true identity and powers to try to force her into marrying him. He even threatens to expose Redel's identity, which terrifies Sistine, and she hopes Glenn will rescue her. The next day, Glenn doesn't show up for the battle and never returns to class or the academy again. On the balcony of the girls' dorm, Sistine remembers how she was pressured into accepting Leos's proposal. She recalls how he spoke to her in a wicked and disrespectful manner, even going so far as to call her a bitch. The next morning, a classmate worries about Sistine and wonders why she gave up on her dreams. She tries to talk to Sistine, but Sistine brushes off her dreams, saying it is what it is, and that she's happy. The classmate keeps trying to engage, but Leos interrupts the conversation and asks Sistine to accompany him somewhere for a meeting. As they walk away, Riel feels a strong urge to attack Leos but can't figure out why. She tries to go after him but is stopped by Rumia, who tells her to wait a little longer. Rumia had tried to talk to Sistine the night before to get to the bottom of things, but Sistine insisted that she should leave her alone, claiming nothing was wrong. Rumia immediately cried to Glenn about it, but he told her to calm down and let him handle it. Then he disappeared. She tells Revel they should have faith in Glenn. A week later, it's the day of Sistine's wedding. She's dressed in a beautiful white gown. Sistine reassures her friends not to worry, telling them to relax and find seats for the wedding. After shooing them away, she starts crying because the thought of marrying Leos overwhelms her. The couple goes to the chapel and says their wedding vows. They both say, "I do," and are declared husband and wife. But just before they can kiss, Glenn bursts in to save Sistine. He creates a a mist to distract everyone, then pulls Sistine away from the cathedral. Glenn tells her he figured out that Leos is blackmailing her, and this was the only way he could see to save her, as he believes he would have lost the duel if he didn't fight seriously. So, he came up with a plan to help himself step up his game. Glenn still thinks Leos is doing all this because he loves Sistine, but Sistine insists that this isn't true. She's seen his true colors. Addicts affected by angel dust are closing in now, surrounding everyone, including those in the chapel who have to flee from them. Glenn tells Sistine to run while he fights them off. They both escape as the zombie-like creatures continue to chase her. He remembers Sarah's death and how it reminds him of their current predicament. He suspects Leos is behind this as he struggles to save Sistine. As they keep running, they encounter Leos again, but this time he reveals he's not really Leos. He's Justice Jadis Lowen, a former executioner of the Imperial Mage Corps. He dispels the magic and shows his true face, telling them that Leos was killed right after the Mage Corps battle earlier. Glenn urges Sistine to run so he can fight Jadis one-on-one. Everything is set up by Jadis to challenge Glenn directly. It's a plot he creates each year to kill powerful mages and seize the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records hold the power to control the very principles of this world, allowing someone to have absolute rights. Jadis believes he must defeat the strongest to claim that right. This is about challenge, not revenge. Jadis conjures up imaginary creatures to attack Glenn. As Glenn tries to defend himself with his magic gun, he hides and uses his skills to try and defeat Jadis, but Jadis overwhelms him at every turn, laughing and sending more creatures his way. They shoot a laser at Glenn, weakening him, but just before they can finish him off, Sistine uses wind magic to hit Jadis. Glenn asks why she didn't run away, and she replies that he doesn't belong in this world of killing. She believes he belongs to their world. Glenn makes her form a two-person cell, and they attack Jadis together. Jadis is annoyed by Sistine's interference, which allows Glenn to overwhelm him right away. Glenn lands a solid punch on Jadis, who is caught off guard by Sistine's skills. Jadis then conjures a massive imaginary creature, but Sistine shoots at it before it can fully form, giving Glenn another chance to strike hard. This punch sends Jadis crashing through walls, causing serious destruction. Defeated, Jadis admits it was Sistine's help that allowed Glenn to win. Glenn checks on Sistine, who has run out of mana and is breathing heavily. In that moment, Jadis escapes but warns Glenn that the Empire needs to be destroyed, as it was built with evil intentions. He promises to defeat Glenn next time they meet before vanishing into the sky. As he runs away, Glenn calls him a bastard and shouts that he shouldn't ever show his face again. Sistine can't walk anymore, so Glenn carries her on his back. When he stands up, the whole class rushes in, smiling at the sight of them. Glenn asks Sistine if the class will still have him as their teacher, and she assures him they will. In the next scene, Glenn is with Albert and a few other men, apologizing for letting Jadis escape. Albert tells him it's fine. He doesn't even remember asking for his help with that. Still, Glenn is angry, especially about Jadis's comment regarding the Akashic Records, which supposedly grant the power to rule the very principles of the world. The thought of Jadis trying to acquire that power scares Glenn. Meanwhile, underneath the city in the underground labyrinth, Eleanor stands beside an enchanted tablet and wonders if what lies ahead is the door she seeks to open. The next morning, Glenn walks through the academy halls happily and runs into a few teachers, playfully making fun of some. At the end of the hall, he encounters Celica, who tells him she plans to explore the underground labyrinth because she feels she has something to do there. She expresses that she's counting on him as he heads off to his class, reminiscing about his past and what he wants to protect, those things that allow him to rise again and again.